Welcome back to our sequence on real-world considerations in engineering design. In this session, we will take a brief look at how the social expectations of a customer or end user limit or constrain an engineering design, and how failure to take all relevant social constraints into account can be just as much of a disaster as a functional failure in the design. Like other constraints in this series on real-world considerations in engineering design, social constraints differ from social consequences in that they must be considered and integrated into a design solution. Although different from a corporate setting, we are nevertheless obligated to address social constraints in the classroom or other educational setting, not only because these social issues do indeed come up in the real world, but because they are required by the organization ABET, which oversees what we teach to engineers before granting a degree and provides accreditation to programs around the United States. ABET defines certain outcomes which students are expected to have once they graduate. Outcome C states that students should have an understanding and ability to design within social constraints. Let's take a look now at what that can look like during the engineering design process. Let's first take a look at what we mean by a social constraint. A social constraint, like other constraints in this series, generally refers to a restriction on a product outside of its basic functionality and design that must be addressed in order to avoid product failure. Social constraints are about what the end user, customer, or consumer of a product is willing to tolerate in terms of what a design looks like, what it does, how much it costs, and so on. Much of this information is nearly impossible to determine within the design team itself and requires a combination of actually talking to potential users and also taking a good hard look at the difficulties that similar products have faced in the marketplace. While the good news is that the oft-touted 80% failure rate for new products has been proven to be a myth, the bad news is that on average about 40% of products fail at various phases of introduction to commercial markets. In this session, we will take a look at a wide range of products that have not recognized or accounted for social constraints of all kinds, and as a result have failed after a short time on the market. Our first case study looks at Google Glass. Google Glass was introduced in 2011 and was intended to project maps, emails, photos, and other web-based materials onto a pair of glasses, thus saving the user from having to consult a computing device, whether it be a laptop, smartphone, PC, or tablet. In principle, Google Glass would allow users to access parts of the web that were critically important without having to open a separate computing device, allowing an ever busier American to conduct business, leisure, and other internet-heavy activity even faster and even more conveniently. At first glance, Google Glass met the American obsession for more, faster, easier. So what happened? Well, in practice, those around Google Glass users thought the product was just simply strange, and Google Glass users found themselves as the object of unwanted attention from bystanders. Another problem with Google Glass was that it appeared to fill a need that wasn't really there. Users just simply didn't know or didn't feel the need to fully explore and exploit the functionality of Google Glass. In fact, Google released Google Glass in beta form in the hopes that software developers would produce applications that would become compelling. In fact, so compelling that the technology would take off and become the next iPhone success story. But this didn't happen. No compelling need to have Google Glass emerged, as both the perception and the lack of essential functionality, as well as the unacceptable look of Google Glass, were the social constraints that ultimately led to the demise of this product. Another promising technology that ran into unanticipated social constraints was the introduction of Bitcoin currency. Bitcoin is a purely digital currency that is intended to operate in cyberspace without the need for a central bank or other centralized processing facility to manage the currency. It was supposed to be the peer-to-peer currency, the end of banks everywhere. So what happened? Well, Bitcoin is still around, but it has run into obstacles related to its misuse. For example, Bitcoin has emerged as the currency of choice in the marketing and sales of illegal drugs online. And this misuse of an otherwise promising technology has drastically limited its success. Misuse of a technology is a difficult social constraint to anticipate, but is nevertheless one that can hamper or even lead to the downfall of many a high-tech product. Traveling back in time, we can take a look at another technology that was also very advanced for its time, the Ford Expo. Released in 1957, the Expo was a technological marvel with extensive and fancy controls that unfortunately didn't work very reliably and made the already high price tag difficult for many an American to swallow. As a result, despite the $2.9 billion that Ford Motor Company invested in this high-tech wonder for its time, the Expo went out of production in 1961 after never making a profit for Ford. The lesson from the Expo is true for the 21st century as well. It is absolutely necessary to understand the customer's expectations for reliability and to conform to this social constraint in order for products to succeed. While the reasons the Expo failed are complex, other products fail for much simpler reasons. For instance, let's take a look at Crystal Pepsi, a clear version of the familiar brown soda that was released by Pepsi in 1992. It tasted like Pepsi, but was clear and caffeine-free. Pepsi anticipated that the new look would help to propel its new product forward. Instead, it did exactly the opposite. Consumers were used to the old look of Pepsi, and even with the caffeine-free feature, wanted the new Pepsi to look like the old. Looks definitely matter, sometimes so much that a product that looks too different can fail to take hold in the marketplace, despite being useful. Unfortunately, the social constraint of how a product or design looks can all too often be overlooked in the design phase. A similar problem faced Coors, the familiar beer label, when the company introduced a water product that was meant to capitalize on the advertising for the clear, clean mountain water used to make the beer. While Coors' advertising campaign for the beer was successful with clear and clean mountain water, the marketing itself of the water flopped. Why? Public perception was a large part of the problem. Consumers wanted to buy beer from Coors, and buying water from the same company that made beer was too far of a stretch, well outside the social constraints of what customers perceived Coors, a beer manufacturer, should be up to. Of course, it didn't help when rumor had it that Coors was drawing water from municipal water supplies, rather than the cool, fresh, pristine waters advertised from the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. The same is true for public perception that yogurt belongs or doesn't belong in shampoo. Clairol came out with a product in 1979 that attempted to capitalize on the new public interest in healthy eating and natural products of all kinds by adding yogurt to its shampoo. While a nice idea on paper, some consumers attempted to eat the shampoo, and others thought it was just too weird to put yogurt in their bowls and on their hair in the morning. And the product, like Coors water, failed as a result of what customers expected to be in a shampoo. Yogurt was not on their list of expectations. Purple, green, and other assorted colors of ketchup besides the obvious red met with a similar fate. Heinz introduced these multiple colors to their ketchup in 2000. Initially, the colors were appealing, especially to children, but their novelty wore out quickly, and only the easy squeeze bottle survived, not just for ketchup, but for many other squeezable condiments as well. Finally, we end our look at how social constraints can submarine an otherwise good product by returning back to the high-tech world, looking at the REO antenna. This baby-size antenna was designed to allow users to retrieve broadcast TV transmissions and send them to their cell phones and other computing devices in order to watch TV anytime, anywhere, on any device. While a great idea to expand the reach of broadcast television and obliterate the need for cable TV, this product succumbed to the constraints and limitations of the law. TV stations sued for the rights to retransmit their broadcast signals, and when the law took the side of the TV stations, the REO went the way of our other case studies today, to eventual product failure. These case studies are but a few examples of how social constraints can prematurely end the journey of promising technologies and ideas in the commercial marketplace. Like other constraints, social constraints cannot be ignored as they are a barrier to product success and must be incorporated into the design process as early as possible. Figuring out these social constraints early in the design process is not easy, but the case studies explored today make it clear that it is never too early to start exploring other similar products and talking to potential customers, whether formally or informally, about perceptions of ideas, designs, and eventually products. This concludes our introduction to the social constraints that can limit and guide product design, from the initial idea phase to the introduction of a product into the marketplace. Thank you for joining us today. We certainly hope that this brief look into the world of social constraints has prompted some thought into how the engineer can explore and understand these constraints early in the design process, and that you'll join us again as we look at other examples of social consequences in this series on real-world considerations in engineering design.